Hey, hi everyone. This is Sai from Let's Upgrade. So let's talk about how to get your certificate. It's very simple. You will see two links in the description. Number one is the place where you have to go and mark your attendance. Marking your attendance tells us, like, okay, you are a legit student who have attended this particular session. Link number two is your assignment. This is where your 90% of the priority is. You have to go and submit the assignment that is given to you in this particular session. Once you're done submitting that assignment, we will be evaluating that. We will send you an email. If you get the passing criteria, then only we will give you the certificate on a particular date that is mentioned again in the description. Please check these three things, and this is the way how you will get a certificate from Let's Upgrade. Number one, mark your attendance. Number two, just go ahead and upload your assignment. Check for the email that you have received it, yes or no. What is the feedback that you have received from your trainer? Number three, check on which date the certificates will be released. Thank you. Bye. All the best. Happy learning.
Hello everyone. I welcome you all to this another lecture of SQL. In this topic, we are going to cover about casting call changing the data types with the method cast. You might be aware of cast methods if you have learned in the oops concept of your any programming languages like C++, Java, etc. So in the similar way, we have that in the SQL as well. So you might be aware of in C++ and Java for the dynamic cast, static cast, something like that. And very famous topic is cast conversions, where we convert the data types to upgraded or degraded as per a requirement. So in this, we are going to convert the column types on the fly. For example, text is converted into integer or date to enable calculation or sorting methods. So if you are new to this topic, you don't have to worry about it because we are going to discuss all through in the detail here. And once you complete it all, we are going to cover from basics to advanced in this lecture. And once we are done completing all the subtopics of this particular one topic, then we will be able to say that we have mastered this topic of casting call. By the way, I am Samiksha Mishra and I will be driving this lecture for you. So let's get started. Before diving into the details of the topic, let's see what would be the agenda of this topics and what are the subtopics that we will be touch upon during the lecture. So the very first one would be the cast basics. Here we will see why, how, when, and where to use. So we will get all the answers to this four questions to have a better implementation of the cast conversions. Then we will see some basic fundamentals about implicit versus explicit conversions. It is one of the famous asked questions during the interviews as well. If you are a fresher, then also, and even if you are experienced, then also. It is a very favorite topic of the panelists. Then we will see some practical conversions. We will touch upon some real life examples using the SQL queries. So we will be writing some queries, we will be creating a table, we will refer those to solve some conversion problems and see how it actually works in the real life. Then we will see like what are the traps or common pitfalls which we should avoid to fall upon while having the conversion of casts. And then lastly, we will see the query integration and the wrap up of this complete topic along with all the hands on or the practical thing, whatever we are going to cover in this. So, I hope you are excited about it, and I would like to request you sit back, relax, just try to do with me if I am trying to do or solve any query. I would want you to do it along with me so that you also get the better idea or better clarity about the topic. And in case of any doubts, you can go back and revisit the topic again. So let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. To first understand like what are the basics or the fundamentals of the caste. So the very first question comes in our mind is what is caste, and why does that change the data types in SQL? So for example, I have created a student table. Here I have roll number, name, address, date, or any other attribute, phone number. So let's assume here the date was stored as a format of November and something something, or of September something something. And suddenly one requirement comes, oh, I need to sort that with respect to integer, and I want this format as 05092011 or something like similar to this. So if you see, this format is in the text format and this is in integer format. So how and when we are going to use it, I hope that is clear, that it is not necessary that we need to change all the columns throughout, but on the go we can see and extract the type of the data which is required during the extraction of the data of the query. So SQL stores data differently. So let's first talk about what are the type of data sets or data types. So we have so many data types like text, integer, right? And then we have varchar, we have date format, and so on. Sometimes data is stored incorrectly. So if you see in this case, the date was stored in the text format, but the requirement was in int format. In such cases, we can use the cast methods here. Cast allows you to temporarily store the data from a value from one type of the another during query execution. So it won't change my original table or data set or anything, but whenever we are running a query, only during that time my cast conversion will be called and it will change my data. So this is not as complicated what it looks like, but when we see some real life examples or scenario, then you will be able to relate better than in which cases we can actually use such conversions required. Then secondly, we have to make sure some key points about it. So okay, let me note down some key points about my cast. So the very first one what we discussed is it does not change my table. It enables some functionality. It enables what? It enables maths on, for example, text numbers. It enables correct sorting. It enables date comparisons. And then lastly, it also enables or opens the door for self joins. So if you see how versatile and how flexible this cast method is. Now, if I want to see an example, so let me write a query. So let me write select just simply 10 plus 5. Okay. So if we see, so it is unexpected or inconsistent result, right? Because we have value as text. Using cast, how we can do it? So let us try to use use with cast. Then I can write the same query as select. I would write cast and I would mention as integer. Okay, and in the similar way, I would write for my 5 as well. So it will help us resolve the problem which we were trying to concatenate this string here, right? It would be considered as a string. But here we are trying to make it as integer and it will be treated as an integer and we will get the output as 15. But in this case, there could be a possibility that we get output as 10 5. How versatile is it to use, right? So we saw using cast how we can do that. Now let's see what are the data types involved in cast. So for the very first one we have text to integer, Then we have text to real. Real is nothing but my real number. Then we have text to date format. Then we have integer to text. And then lastly, we have real to integer. So these are some methods which we can use to convert. So, how and where we can use it? So, let me give an example as well. So, for example, text to integer, we can use in calculations. For text to real, we can use for decimal maths because it will help us enable the decimal points. For date one, it will help us for date filtering. And then for integer to text, we can have it for display or sorting. And then lastly, for real to integer, whenever we want to round it out. So in such cases, we can use these, and these are most common data type you can cast. Isn't it simple? Like, it is straightforward. So you don't have to worry if you are unable to understand right now. It is as simple as like what you are trying to visualizing right now. Additionally, we will use examples or hands-on as well when we are trying to do anything. So meanwhile, let us create a table which we will refer to. So I have opened SQLite online, and let me create a couple of table with the help of which we can do some examples as well. So let me create a table, orders raw, and let me add some values to it. Let's say we have order ID of type text, then order date also of type text, and amount of type text. So if you see, we could have taken it as an integer, but we are taking it as raw. And let's take one more. Let's create table customers, and let me add some attributes to it. So let's have order ID. I will make it as integer. And then let's have customer name as type of text. Let me create this as well. Okay, so I'm done creating the table. Let me add some values to it. So let me do insert into my very first table, orders raw, and values. So I do have some values handy. So let me add those. So let's try to run if that works, and let's try to see if my table is getting reflected or not from orders row. Yeah, okay, we can see that. And let's insert the value for my customer as well. So let me do insert into my customer table values, and let me add some value to it. Okay, we have added it. Now let's see. Select star from my customers. Okay, so we were able to see that we have created two tables here. Now let's try to see how we can add one query, like whatever we have tried to do so far. So let me write just a simple query to do that. So we were trying to do select plus, and let's see what we get. I don't think so we will get the correct one. Okay, so we got the numbers get concatenated, right? If I just simply remove this 5 here and add this, let's see what we get. So we still get the first one. So in case of typecasting, what I can do is I can do select cast as integer, and then I will add 50 to it. Now let's see. So if you see, we were able to cast and add 100 to it, right? So that's how you can use the cast methods. Now let's try to understand about implicit versus explicit conversions. So first let's talk about implicit conversions. So for this conversion types, SQL converts automatically. Okay, and it happens silently, like we won't be able to know. Additionally, it can be inconsistent, or I can say risky at times. So we saw an example of select 100 plus 5, right? So we got the correct output. In such case, implicit conversion was happening, right? But what is it there when we say explicit conversion is there? right? So in case of, let's move it here, explicit conversions, we can control what needs to be converted. So we can control the conversion. Then it is like clear, predictable, right? So in the same example, we saw select, and then for the 100, we added cast, and then we added 5. So in this, what we want for us to get converted, we will specify that. So for implicit, it is happened by SQL automatically, and for the explicit, it is in our control, and we decide. We decide. It is in the hands of SQL for the implicit, right? Now, additionally, let's see what is the syntax of cast where it fits in a SQL query. So, we have already discussed about the syntax, so I hope that is obvious for you now. So, but let me just simply mention. So, we would mention cast, my first expression, then I will mention as, and then my data type where I want to convert it. So, that's how the syntax is being used for the cast. So where cast can be used, so it can be used for my select methods, my where method, my join clause, okay, my order by, and my group by. So for example, if I need to do something, so let me open the IDE. So let's try to write a query. So I will write select, and I would cast my amount, okay, my amount as integer, and I will make it as amount num, which is of num type, from my orders raw. So let's see if it is able to cast or not. So if you see, so let's print my first column as well, so that we can see the difference if there is any. So if you see, like, by our naked eyes, we won't be able to see the exact difference, but we know that we specified my amount as text. So in the background, the obvious data type of amount will be taken as text here. Now let's see how SQL performs the conversion automatically by itself, right? So let's see an example of select, and I will put star 2. So what SQL tries to do is it tries to convert this as an integer, since we have made it as text, right? So it will try to convert it. But the problem is, if we do the same for select the ABC star 2, it will be able to give us the example? No. So it will fail. So here where we get the unexpected results. And that's when we told that, implicit can be risky at times or inconsistent at times. So that's why we say that. Situations where explicit cast is required. So let's talk about explicit here in detail. So when data comes from CSV file, right? When we are trying to join some columns, when we are trying to sort some column like text types, and when we are trying to filter it. So in such cases, we can do the explicit typecasting. So let's see an example again. So let me write a query for you. So we will see the example of my explicit typecasting only. So I would do select star. I would mention from my orders row where. So we mentioned, right, that cast can be used with these clause. So we are going to use that only. So I will use with where my cast amount, as I will put as integer, is greater than 500. So I'm trying to compare my integer type of amount with 500. If I would have compared the amount which would be text, then sometimes it would give me inconsistent result. So if you see, I got two expected output, which is correct. So we were able to see the difference. Now comparing the results with and without cast, so far we have seen how does that look like. So let me take one more example. Let me open the IDE, and let's say I am writing select amount from my order row. Okay, and I will do order by my amount. Let's see what we get. Okay, so if you see, we get the example here. But like if we would have taken 1200, 2000, 250, 500, so it is inconsistent, right? Inconsistent. Now let's try to typecast it and make it consistent. So let me do select amount from orders row, and I will put order by my, and I will use my cast method. So I will put my amount as integer. Now let's see what we get. Are we able to get the right one? So if you see, it was able to give us the right order. So that's where the explicit casting comes into the picture, because we saw when we tried to use the order by for amount which was of type text, then we got an inconsistent result, because the SQL server was trying to do it implicitly. But when we try to do is explicitly, so we were able to get the correct order, what is expected, right? So we were able to achieve that as well. Then, additionally, let's see what is the impact of implicit versus explicit conversions on performance. So, when I say performance, so when I say casting inside where can prevent index uses. So, if you are aware of indexing, then casting can help us use the indexing. That what that means. And then repeatedly, if implicit conversions is happening, then it will be slow in performance, right? Explicit is easier to debug, and it also help us to make my data readable. So it helps in so much way more ways, and it store the data types correctly. Stores correctly. So, like, these are the major fundamental about implicit versus explicit. I hope that is clear for you. Now, let's move ahead for the next one. So, now let's talk about some practical conversions. So, when I say practical conversion, what do I mean by that? So, we will just simply see like how some basic conversions will work with the help of example. So for example, we let's check for the amount. So let me open the IDE for that. It will be better to use that. And yeah, we are going to use this. So first of all, let's see how converting strings to numbers in select would look like with the help of my cast clause. So if I want to achieve the same, let me try to do that. So I would use my cast method, and I will take as, and I need to mention which data type I need to get it converted for. And let's name it as amount num. And let's mention my table. So if you see here, we are explicitly converting my amount from text to integer. If I would have, sorry, I guess there is some issue. Select order ID, and I need to put comma here. Yeah, that should be fine. This should be my table name. orders. Yeah. Yeah, so if I see here, we are trying to see what my order ID with respect to my amount integer type would look like. We are trying to typecasting it because the amount was in the text format which we have created earlier. And with respect to my order ID, I wanted to get it converted. So, like when I talk about some practical conversions, so we are seeing a live example with the help of the query and the table which we have created, and here we are explicitly converting it. So there could be some multiple use cases as well, so we can have it for my aggregated functions also. So when I say aggregate functions, so, are you able to recall what the aggregate functions are? Let me list it for you. So, some common functions are sum and average, or even we have some comparisons functions. So, these are called aggregate functions. So, these can be also used under the aggregation function. Now let's try to see how my numbers to string in select and order by would look like. So let's move back to the IDE again, and I will be showcasing select and order by for my cast methods. So let's write a query. So I would say select cast, and let me put my amount as text, which is already there, but yeah, let's make it as that. And I will put an or operator, and let me put USD here, and let me put as for amount, and then I will make it as from my orders raw table. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to concatenate it with my text using my or method. So we could have also used the plus sign, but here we are using the pipe symbols to use the same for my concatenation of my amount, which is of text type, and USD, which is also of text type. And if you see, we were able to get this. If I need one space, let me put one space to make it more readable. So yeah, so if you see, we were able to fetch the formatted amount, right? So in this case, we can use the concatenation method at the same time when we are explicitly converting it. So when we want to talk about some dates and time, so how we can do that? So let's see for those example as well. So let me write a query. Let's do select star, and let me mention my table name, and let me mention my condition. So if you remember, we were able to use cast method with certain clauses where also can be used. So we will be using the same with my where clause, and let me put my order date as date. So in SQL, we do have one date as another data type, which is considered in a standard date format. So let me make it as greater than or equal to, and let me put the string here, which is greater than my 1st of Jan. And let's try to run this. Okay, so looks like we do not have any date as such stored there. So it is not showcasing that. So in such way, we can also convert that, or let me just mention it as 2000 if we can get something. So looks like there is some issue here. I'm not sure why this is not working, but that is how you can use your casting for text to date as well. So, okay, great. So we have seen a couple of typecasting for my data type for text, date, integer, and so on. So that's how you can do. So dates are usually stored as in text format. So let's try to write that. So here, date stored as text must be cast for comparisons. So, like otherwise, the string it won't be able to recognize and it won't be able to count it. So, ISO format works best here in this case. So, what is the ISO format if you would ask me? So, it is like we are supposed to write my year and then month and then my day. So, this is my standard ISO format which we should use when we are trying to, represent my date here. Also, make sure like whenever we want to cast with where using join, how we can do that. So let's see with that example as well. So we already have created another table here which we have not used yet, which is my customer table. So let's try to use join method for my order and customer table to see how would that work. So let me create one query for you and let me write I have created O as an object for my order ID and C for my customer name, like my customer table. And let me mention that orders row O. Let me create that object and let me make the join customers table C. Okay. So I will just make it as C. Yeah. And I need to put on cast. So whenever we are using the clause join, then we are supposed to put on clause as well. So I would put my order ID as my integer and it should match with my C dot order ID. So if you observe, my order ID for my orders raw table was of type text, but at the same time my order ID for my customer table was of type integer. So in this case, on the fly, we are supposed to cast this order ID in such a way so that we can compare both in the same way. So if I ask you if like there is a string 1 and there is an integer 1, so like usually the basic program would be able to recognize it, but for example if we create some very complicated operation and until unless the data types are not same, it would be very challenging and misleading from the compiler point of view, that it will give us a wrong result or wrong output which would end up with inconsistency in the data. So that's why we created my order ID as integer using my cast method because it was of type text. And for my customer table, it was already of type integer. So if you see, so it is showing me all the data which matches my both the table using the join where it is matching with my order ID. So if you see, we have 5 data here, 5 here, and it has made the join and it has given me all the output together. So the main fundamental thing which we need to make sure is, so one is ensure data types are matching. Okay. And the other one is like we need to avoid or we need to prevent my silent mismatches. Like we don't want to be reliable on the compiler or the server SQL server, that it would cast by itself using implicit, because we have seen in the previous cases that it has given us misleading data. If you remember, when we tried to sort it out, it was not actually sorting because it was of type text, but the moment we casted to integer type, we were able to get the correct sorting order, right? So make sure like these 2 points are covered whenever we are trying to write a query, the data types are matching, and we want to prevent the mismatch to avoid inconsistency, because data is all about like the good numbers or the consistent data. Because when you are working in a large scale, you have so many things and you cannot afford to put a single wrong value to it, otherwise your whole data will get messed up. So yeah, I hope we were able to understand practical conversions, and we saw so many casting as well. Now let's talk about some common pitfalls or some ideas which we need to avoid while using this terminologies of cast and type conversions, because it is very common to get confused, and we have to make sure that we are not converting some data which is irrelevant to be converted. So let's see a couple of examples here. So let me showcase a bad example first. Bad example of conversion. So when I say bad example, what a bad example would look like. So let me write a query. You can call out if it is a bad example or not. So let me write a query. So I will write select, and let me put one cast, and let me just simply take one text as. Okay, so I have written a pretty bad query here. Why do I say it as bad? So if you say originally ABC is of type text, and if we convert as an integer, wouldn't it will mislead what I was expecting it to be treated as, right? So like we need to avoid such cases because we do not want inconsistent data in our database. Right. So here the result would come out to be, let me write here, my output would be error, or I can say null. Because you can clearly see, right, ABC cannot be converted as integer. So cast usually, okay, let me write down some points. So these are some important points, I would say. So cast assumes valid format. So in this case, cast was not aware if ABC was actually an integer or a text, or it can be actually converted to an integer or not. But it assumes that my format is valid. And secondly, if we have, for example, garbage data. So for example, like something we have put it as null or garbage, then it will also mislead, which would lead us to failures. So these are some common mistakes which we need to avoid. So okay, so this we have seen while writing the query, like these are like very obvious things which we need to avoid. Whenever we are seeing my data, we need to make sure that we are casting it properly. We are not assuming that it is a valid format. We have to pay attention to it. Now secondly, we need to see how we can avoid performance issue while casting. So okay, let me write that down. So let's see how performance issue can be avoided. So when I say performance issue, so some basic terminologies for performance would be my, for example, cache gets full, or my process is overall very slow, or it has been stuck in some race condition. So these are some common examples of performance issue. If you are not facing like all of these, then your performance is coming out to be great, then we do not have to touch that upon. So for example, where like I'm using my casting in where repeatedly, so how would that look like? So for example, I have my amount table, sorry, that orders table, right? So I have this orders table. So if you see, currently we have only 5 values in my rows. But what if we get 1 million or like more than that value in my data? Okay. And I need to check if my amount is greater than 1000 or not. So can you think of, like, we will ending up reading all of those, and it will help us create like more time consuming thing. And because we are going to cast it, because my amount is in text format, it is not even in integer format. So for each row, first of all, my amount will be casted, and then it will be compared with the integer value with respect to my 1000, and then it will add it to my view virtual table, like if it is a valid one or not. And then overall we will get my output. Okay, this is the amount which is greater than 1000. So in such cases, it may consume a lot of time. So what would be my better approach? So when I say what will be my better approach, the very first thing what we can do is we can clean the data beforehand. So it will help us not read the one which is not required, right? And the other one we can use is use CTE. So CTE we have already discussed in one of our modules. If you are not aware of that, I would recommend you visit it right away after this lecture, so that you can see how CTE can be helpful here. And then we need to validate data before the typecasting. So let me see. So if I say I have this query, select star from my that orders raw I'm taking, and let me put my where clause, where, and my amount, and I can put this clause here, globe. I need to see that, it contains only this or not. Then in such case, my amount will be considered as valid since it is of type text, right? So what we are trying to do here is we are checking the format before even reading it. So we are consuming, sorry, we are not consuming that time which we are going to help us, get into trouble for my performance issue. And the second one, what we are trying to prevent is prevent runtime errors, because we do not want, like, for my 1 million data, like after something like my database got crashed or my query got crashed because my format was incorrect and it was unable to fetch the data properly. So in such cases we can end up having the runtime issue. So we can validate those beforehand, what we discussed previously. And lastly, we can see or recognize some unsafe or, ambiguous cast. So if I say, um, let me write a statement here. If I say cast, let me put a date here, 2026. Okay, and I am putting it as date. So if you see, it is already in the date format. So like we need to first of all standardize it first. Like my date format was YYY. Like these are some ambiguous format which might make my compiler get confused and we might end up having the incorrect data. So these are some common things which we need to make sure that we are not uh, considering while writing along with my cast clause. So now let's lastly touch upon the query integration and the wrap up summary of my this particular topic of cast all. So while using the cast clause, what we have seen so far that we were able to use it with select clause, my where clause. We have seen some examples as well. We have used it with my joints. We have used it with my order by, and additionally we have used for comparisons as well, right? So what I would recommend is I want you to practice from your side as well, so you get better clarity about this topic, and you will be able to have a hold grip on this as well. In future, if anyone asks anything about caste, so you will be able to deliver your answer precisely and correctly at the same time. Then secondly, what we have seen, how designing a beginner friendly queries with cast was like, right? So we have seen some guidelines. So some guidelines were that only cast once, like no need to mess that up, like no need to complicate your query. If it is required only once, then just stick to that. Keep my conversions readable. It shouldn't be like that you are converting it into some random data type which is unnecessary and irrelevant with respect to your table and the query. And the very important one, prefer clarity over cleverness. It's not a game about, oh, I can cast anything and anywhere. No. You have to have that clarity where and in what situation you need to cast it out and when you can avoid it. Because we have seen some performance issue as well, that if we end up having the wrong casting type conversions, then we might end up getting failures or null exceptions or something like those. So we don't want to get trapped in such scenarios. So after that, let's summarize it. Summary. So what we have learned so far. So we saw about using explicit versus implicit conversions, and explicits are safe to use because implicit are done automatically by the SQL server, and it might be ambiguous at times, right? And we don't want to get into the trouble or having some failure or inconsistency in the data. Then cast only when required. Cast when required. So these are some very common points, like, which we usually don't touch upon, and we feel like, okay, let it be. That's fine. We can use cast everywhere or anywhere. But make sure the use case is about it, and whenever you are using it, the requirement is there, and we are not doing it like unnecessarily. We need to validate data before casting. So we have seen scenarios where we did not validate and we end up having some failures. And prefer a clean schema design so that you also have clarity about what your table is about, what are all the data types, where you need to cast and where you need to avoid. So if we make sure that we are covering all of this thing, then it would be able to help us understand better where we need to use it, right? So we have touched upon all of these points in the details, and I hope it was clear for you. Now lastly, I would request you practice some standard problem which is available on the internet on any online platform. You can check that out and write at least 10 to 20, so you get better understanding. And I hope after this you can say that you have mastered the cast calls in SQL, right? So we have discussed from basic to advanced, and we have covered everything. And definitely we can get into the details. If you're interested, you can check which is present on internet and get into deeper. But for your curriculum point of view or your interview point of view, like, this is more than sufficient. If you are aware of this, then you are good to go. I hope this was helpful for you. Keep the learning going, and I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, thank you. See you next time. Bye bye.